I came back from a school trip and my bedroom was gone. Not messy, not rearranged, gone. My parents had turned it into my stepsister's art studio while I was away for 7 days. When I confronted them, my mom just shrugged and said, "Emma needed the space more than you do." My dad nodded and added, "You're almost 18 anyway, time to grow up." I didn't argue, I didn't cry. I just smiled and said, "You're absolutely right." 3 weeks later, at their 20th anniversary party, I stood up during the toasts. What happened next? Well, let me just say their celebration became very memorable for all the wrong reasons. Let me back up. I had just returned from this amazing marine biology trip to the Florida Keys. 7 days of research, diving, and actually feeling like I belonged somewhere. I'd saved up for months to afford it babysitting, dog walking, selling homemade jewelry online. My parents didn't contribute a dime, but that's another story. The trip was incredible. For the first time in years, I felt valued. The professors praised my research, my teammates actually listened when I spoke, and I remember thinking on the bus ride home, maybe things can be different now. Maybe I can show them what I accomplished. I was exhausted when I got home, dragging my duffel bag up the front steps. The house smelled like paint fumes, which was weird. I called out, "I'm home," but got no response. Mom's car was in the driveway, so I knew someone was there. I climbed the stairs to my room, already imagining collapsing on my bed and telling them about the dolphin research project that had got me noticed by the university professors. I turned the corner toward my door and stopped dead. My bedroom door was wide open, but it wasn't my bedroom anymore. The walls were painted a soft lavender instead of the blue I'd chosen 3 years ago. There was an easel where my desk used to be, canvases stacked against the wall, and art supplies organized on expensive-looking shelves. My bed was gone. My bookshelf was gone. My posters, my photos, my certificates from academic competitions, all of it just gone. "Oh, you're back." I turned to see Emma, my stepsister, standing in the doorway with a paintbrush in her hand. She was 2 years younger than me and had moved in when Mom married her dad 4 years ago. "Careful where you step, I just finished the floor treatment." I stood there, luggage still in my hands, trying to process what I was seeing. "Where's my stuff?" "Oh, your mom packed it up. I think it's in the garage. This lighting is so much better for my art portfolio. I'm applying to art schools next year, you know." That's when Mom appeared, drying her hands on a kitchen towel like this was any ordinary Tuesday. "Sweetie, you're home. How was the trip?" "Mom, where's my room?" She glanced toward what used to be my space. Well, Emma really needed a proper studio space for her college applications. You understand, right? "You're so practical about these things. Where am I supposed to sleep?" "We set up the air mattress in the office. It's only temporary until you figure out your college situation." "The office?" "A windowless room that doubled as storage, filled with old tax documents and exercise equipment that hadn't been used since 2019. You gave away my room while I was gone." Dad appeared then, and I could see in his face that he'd been dreading this conversation. "Look, kiddo, Emma's got a real shot at some prestigious art programs. She needs to build a strong portfolio, and good lighting is crucial for that kind of work." "What about my academic achievements? What about the research I just completed?" Mom sighed, "That's wonderful, honey, but let's be realistic. Emma has a talent that could actually lead somewhere." That word realistic, it hung in the air like a slap. I just spent a week with marine biologists who told me I had real potential, who encouraged me to apply for research internships, who saw something in me worth developing. But my own parents couldn't see past Emma's watercolor paintings. "You're almost 18 anyway," Dad continued. "Time to start thinking about independence." Emma was 17, but apparently her age didn't disqualify her from needing a dedicated art studio. I didn't fight it. I didn't scream or slam doors or threaten to call relatives. I just nodded and said, "You're absolutely right. I need to start thinking about independence." The next 3 weeks were interesting. I slept on that air mattress in the office, which deflated partially every night, leaving me on the floor by morning. I kept my clothes in garbage bags since there was no closet space. When friends called, I made excuses about why they couldn't come over, but I also started paying attention to things I'd never noticed before. Like how Mom bragged to her sister about Emma's incredible artistic vision, while mentioning my academic achievements only when directly asked. Like how Dad had already started converting the garage into an additional studio space for Emma's future projects. Like how Emma had been planning this room takeover for months, measuring the space and picking paint colors while I was still living in it. Most importantly, I started noticing the conversations about their upcoming anniversary party. Mom and Dad had been planning this celebration for over a year, 20 years of marriage, and they wanted to mark it with a big party. They'd rented the country club, hired a caterer, invited over 100 people, family, friends, colleagues, neighbors. Dad's boss was coming. Mom's entire book club, both sets of grandparents. Even Emma's biological mother, who rarely attended family events. It needs to be perfect, Mom kept saying. 20 years is such a milestone. The party was clearly the most important social event they'd hosted in years. Mom had a new dress specially tailored. Dad bought an expensive watch to commemorate the occasion. They'd even hired a photographer to document the evening. As I listened to them plan every detail, an idea began forming. They wanted a memorable celebration. I could certainly help with that. The night of the party, I got dressed carefully. Not too formal, not too casual. I wanted to look like the responsible, mature daughter they were always telling me to be. I even helped set up, arranging flowers and making sure the guest book was positioned properly. The country club looked beautiful. Round tables with white linens, centerpieces of white roses and baby's breath, string lights creating a warm ambience. About 100 people filled the space, a mix of ages, from elderly relatives to Dad's younger colleagues. During cocktail hour, I mingled politely, answered questions about school, smiled when people said how grown up I looked, accepted compliments on behalf of my parents for throwing such a lovely party. Several people mentioned how proud Mom and Dad must be of me, especially after hearing about my marine biology research. I smiled and thanked them, filing away their names for later. Dinner went smoothly. The food was excellent, conversation flowed easily, and Mom and Dad looked genuinely happy. They kept catching each other's eyes across the room and smiling. It was actually sweet, in a way that made what I was about to do feel almost cruel. Almost, then came the toasts. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. Dad's brother spoke first, sharing funny stories about their childhood. Mom's college roommate talked about how she'd known they were perfect for each other from the first time she met Dad. A few colleagues offered brief congratulations, then I stood up. "Excuse me," I said, tapping my water glass with a spoon. "I'd like to say something too." The room quieted down. Mom and Dad looked pleased, probably expecting some sweet daughter tribute about their love story or what great parents they were. 20 years is definitely worth celebrating, I began, my voice carrying clearly across the room. And I think it's important to be honest about who my parents really are, especially on such a special night. I could see Mom's smile faltering slightly, but she was probably just nervous about public speaking. Dad was still beaming. 3 weeks ago, I returned from an incredible educational trip to the Florida Keys, where I conducted marine biology research with university professors. I was gone for exactly 7 days. I paused, scanning the room. Everyone was listening attentively. When I came home, I discovered that my parents had completely cleared out my bedroom and converted it into an art studio for my stepsister. Not just redecorated, completely emptied. My bed, my desk, my bookshelves, my academic awards, my personal belongings, all packed away in garbage bags in the garage. I could hear murmurs starting around the room. Mom's face had gone pale. When I asked where I was supposed to sleep, they told me they'd set up an air mattress in the storage room. When I asked why this happened while I was away, they explained that Emma needed the space more than I did because she's applying to art schools. The murmurs were getting louder. I noticed several people glancing between my parents and me with confused expressions. Now, I want to be clear, Emma is 17 years old. I'm 18 in 2 months. Apparently, being almost 18 means I don't deserve a bedroom, but being 17 and artistic means you deserve 2 rooms. Dad started to stand up, but I continued before he could interrupt. The really beautiful part is what they said when I asked about my marine biology research, the kind that might actually lead to a career in science. My mom said, and I quote, "Let's be realistic. Emma has a talent that could actually lead somewhere." The room had gone completely silent except for the clink of someone nervously setting down their wine glass. So tonight, I want to toast my parents for teaching me such valuable lessons about family priorities, about supporting your children's dreams, and about the importance of communication. I raised my water glass. Here's to 20 years of marriage, and to everyone in this room, knowing exactly what kind of parents and step-parents you've chosen to celebrate tonight. I took a sip of water and sat down. The silence that followed was deafening. You could practically hear people processing what they'd just heard. I saw Dad's boss lean over to whisper something to his wife. Mom's book club friends were exchanging glances. Both grandmothers looked absolutely appalled. Then the whispers started, quiet at first, then building as people began talking to their table neighbors. I caught fragments, threw away her belongings. While she was gone, in garbage bags, academic research. Mom finally found her voice. "Sweetheart, I think there's been a misunderstanding." "Is it true?" That was my paternal grandmother. her voice cutting across the room like a knife. Did you really give away her bedroom while she was on a school trip? Dad looked around the room helplessly. Well, yes, but. And put her things in garbage bags in the garage. This from Mom's sister, who looked horrified. It's more complicated than Mom started. No, it's not, said Dr. Patterson, Dad's boss, his voice cold. It's actually quite simple. You displaced your daughter to benefit your stepdaughter, and you did it while she was away so she couldn't object. The country club manager approached our table hesitantly. Is everything all right here? Should we perhaps move to a private area? But the damage was already done. The room was buzzing with conversation, none of it complimentary. I watched as several couples made polite excuses and gathered their coats. Mom's college roommate looked like she was reassessing everything she thought she knew about her old friend. Emma's biological mother stood up from her table and walked over to us. Emma, she said quietly, get your coat. We're leaving. But Mom, now. As they headed for the exit, Emma shot me a look that was part anger, part something that might have been guilt. The party essentially ended after that. People finished their drinks quickly and made awkward small talk while clearly planning their exits. The photographer, who had been enthusiastically documenting the celebration, quietly packed up his equipment. Within an hour, the beautifully decorated room was nearly empty, except for our immediate family and a few die-hard relatives who were sticking around for what promised to be a very uncomfortable conversation. Dad's brother pulled him aside. What the hell were you thinking, Mike? Mom's mother approached me. Sweetheart, is this really what happened? I nodded, every words. She turned to look at her daughter with an expression I'd never seen before. Caroline, I am ashamed of you. That's when Mom finally broke down. Not the pretty, sympathetic crying you see in movies, but the ugly, desperate sobbing of someone who realizes they've destroyed something important and there's no way to fix it. The ride home was silent except for the sound of Mom crying in the passenger seat. When we got to the house, I went straight to the storage room where I'd been sleeping and started packing the few belongings I could fit in my suitcase. Dad knocked on the door. Where are you going? Grandma's house. She's got a proper guest room and she's always said I was welcome. You don't have to leave, we can work this out. I looked at him. Dad, you gave away my bedroom while I was on an educational trip that I paid for myself. You told me I needed to grow up and think about independence. Well, this is me being independent. Mom appeared in the doorway, her makeup completely ruined. Please don't go, we can fix this. How? I asked. Are you going to kick Emma out of her new art studio? Are you going to explain to all your friends and Dad's colleagues that you made a mistake? Are you going to acknowledge that my academic achievements matter just as much as Emma's paintings? Neither of them answered. I finished packing and called my grandmother, who immediately said she'd come pick me up. While I waited, I sat in that storage room one last time, looking at the exercise bike and boxes of old tax returns that had been deemed more worthy of permanent residence than me. When Grandma arrived, she took one look at the situation and shook her head. 40 years I spent raising children, and I never once thought about giving away their bedrooms. As I loaded my bags into her car, neighbors were starting to come home from their own Saturday night activities. A few of them looked curious about the tearful scene playing out in our driveway, and I wondered how long it would take for the story of tonight's anniversary party to make its way around the neighborhood. The next few days were a whirlwind. Word of the anniversary party disaster spread quickly through Mom and Dad's social circles. Dad's boss called him into a private meeting on Monday morning. Apparently, several colleagues had expressed concerns about his judgment and character after witnessing the public revelation. Mom's book club indefinitely postponed their next meeting. Several of the women had called to express their disappointment in her behavior, and she was too embarrassed to face them. The country club called to ask if everything was all right, since several members had reached out to express concerns about the family conflict they'd witnessed at such a supposedly joyous celebration. But the most interesting development came from Emma herself. She showed up at my grandmother's house 3 days after the party, looking miserable. Can we talk? We sat on Grandma's front porch, and for a while, neither of us said anything. Finally, she spoke. I didn't know they were going to do it while you were gone. But you knew they were planning to do it. She nodded, staring at her hands. I'd been asking for a better art space for months. I knew your room had the best lighting, but I thought they'd talk to you first, maybe work out some kind of arrangement. Like what? Sharing the room, setting up schedules. I don't know, something fair. I looked at her. Emma, you're 17. You've lived in that house for 4 years. In all that time, have you ever seen them treat me fairly when it came to choosing between what I needed and what you wanted?" She was quiet for a long time. "No," she finally admitted. "And after what happened at the party, hearing how they talked about your research, I felt sick." "So what now?" "I told them I don't want the room anymore. I can't work in a space that was stolen from someone else." This surprised me. What did they say? They freaked out, started talking about all the money they'd spent on the renovation, how I was being ungrateful, how I was throwing away opportunities. She looked up at me. "It was like hearing how they talk to you." That afternoon, Emma moved her art supplies down to the basement. It wasn't ideal lighting, but she said it felt better than working in my stolen room. Mom and Dad, meanwhile, were dealing with the ongoing fallout from their anniversary party. Dad's promotion, which had seemed like a sure thing, was suddenly under review. Mom lost 3 clients from her freelance marketing business after word spread about how she treated her own daughter. They called me repeatedly, leaving voicemails that ranged from angry to pleading to desperate. I didn't return any of them. 2 weeks after the anniversary party, they showed up at Grandma's house. Not to demand I come home, but to apologize. Really apologize, not the half-hearted, excuse-filled kind they usually offered. "We were wrong," Dad said, "completely, inexcusably wrong. We let our favoritism blind us to what we were doing to you," Mom added, tears in her eyes. "And we're so sorry." I listened to everything they had to say. They offered to restore my room exactly as it had been. They promised to pay for my college applications and the first year of tuition. They begged me to come home. "I appreciate the apology," I told them, "but I'm staying here." "Forever?" Mom asked, looking heartbroken. "No, just until I leave for college. I've applied to several marine biology programs, including some on the other side of the country. I think some distance will be good for all of us." They tried to argue, but Grandma cut them off. "She's made her decision. After what you two did, she has every right to choose where she feels safe and valued." Before they left, Dad asked, "Will you at least consider coming to family dinners sometimes?" "Maybe," I said, "but not until Emma gets her room back." He looked confused. "Her room?" "The master bedroom. If Emma needs space for her art and I'm not living there anyway, why shouldn't she have the biggest room in the house? Unless, of course, you think she doesn't deserve it now that the situation has changed." The look on his face told me everything I needed to know. Emma would be keeping the basement studio. 6 months later, I was accepted to a prestigious marine biology program with a full scholarship. The professors who had supervised my Florida Keys research had written recommendation letters that, according to the admissions committee, were some of the strongest they'd ever received. I got the acceptance letter on a Tuesday afternoon while helping Grandma with her grocery shopping. I called Mom and Dad to share the news, and for the first time in years, they seemed genuinely proud of my achievements. "We always knew you were special," Mom said, her voice thick with emotion. "No, you didn't," I replied, but not unkindly. "But maybe now you'll remember to look for it in your next daughter." Emma had been accepted to art school too, not one of the prestigious programs she'd originally aimed for, but a good state school with a solid reputation. She seemed genuinely happy about it and had stopped mentioning the lighting in her basement studio. The night before I left for college, she knocked on my door at Grandma's house. "I wanted to thank you," she said. "For what?" "For teaching me something important about family, about how people should treat each other." "What did I teach you?" "That just because someone gives you something doesn't mean it was theirs to give." That was the closest thing to a real apology I ever got from her, and honestly, it was enough. As for Mom and Dad, they slowly started rebuilding their social standing, but it took years. People in their circle didn't forget what they'd witnessed at that anniversary party. Dad never did get that promotion, and Mom's business never fully recovered. But here's the thing, I didn't feel guilty about any of it, because what happened that night wasn't revenge, it was truth. And sometimes the truth is more devastating than any punishment you could devise. 3 years later, when I was home from college for Christmas, I walked past my old bedroom. It had been turned into a home office, neat and impersonal. No trace of either my childhood or Emma's art studio remained. "Do you miss it?" Dad asked, noticing me looking. "No," I said, and I meant it. I outgrew it. I'd learned something important that night at the anniversary party. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't to plot elaborate revenge or fight back with equal cruelty. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply tell people who you really are and let them decide if they can live with what they've done. Looking back, I realized that standing up at that anniversary party